golden rule. You need to mute your mic and you also need to close your videos. Please, we don't want to have our mic on and we don't want to have our videos on also. Mommy Elizabeth, please, can you help us close your video? Thank you very much, ma. Please kindly shut your video for the sake of network. Mrs. Elizabeth Soares, I'm not sure I got that name correctly, but please kindly shut your video, Mrs. Elizabeth, if you can hear me. Thank you very, very much, ma. God bless you. Okay, so moving on, for the sake of our time, we don't want to waste time, of course. We are talking about effective use of antibiotics, in poultry. So before we delve into, the in and out of this based on what we have today, Mr. Adebayo, can you just give us an overview in summary of what this topic is about? Can you just give us an overview of what this topic is about? Effective use of antibiotics in poultry. Can you give us an overview of what we are looking at? What is it, before, because by the time we begin to delve into it, so that people will be able to understand, okay, this is the reason why we are asking this question. This is the reason why this thing is being discussed like this. So can you give us an overview of what this particular topic is about? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stalon Femi. This topic will majorly address a lot of misconceptions about antibiotic use. It will set a lot of things straight about how to use antibiotics correctly, and also to basically set a foundation, lay a foundation for basic understanding of how birds are treated, either prophylactically, that's preventively, or for treatment purposes. So this session will seek to address a lot of the knowledge gap. A lot of people just feel, oh, my birds are sick, this is this, someone told me to use this, someone told me to use that. So I think it will majorly help farmers, beginners or intermediate or even professionals, because it's a very, very wide topic. So we learn every day. So a lot of, in the discussion, I myself can even learn one or two things from other people. It's possible. So, but it's going to be like a summary, because it is the list, the curriculum itself is inexhaustible. It's very wide. But this will be like a foundation for proper and effective understanding of how antibiotics work and proper use for achieving effective results. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for that brief introduction of what this topic is about. And I believe that we all are ready for the things that will be said here today. So going into it without wasting time. So antibiotics are often a crucial part of poultry farming, but it has been found that overuse of it can lead to resistance. So can you explain what antibiotic resistance is and why it is such a concern in poultry farming?
Okay, I'll start by briefly just defining antibiotics. Like, antibiotics are just the way they sound. They are let me say, they are synthetic or synthesized drugs. We can call them drug that kills or slow the growth of bacteria. So they either kill the bacteria or they slow the growth. So they have different modes of operation. Some will inhibit the synthesis of protein, some will block some cell walls and all that. So basically, antibiotics, they are drugs that kill or slow the growth of bacteria. And briefly, let me also say that they can also be classed based on these two actions. If it kills the bacteria, it can be referred to as bactericidal antibiotic. But if it slows it down, it can be referred to as bacteriostatic. Now, let's leave all the definitions. The fact that an antibiotic slows down a bacteria does not mean it is less effective. That's the first point I want us to pick here. So the fact that it slows down, it is less effective. So, like you said, the resistance is a very, very major issue. Overuse is not the only thing that causes resistance. That's the second thing I want us to pick. Inadequate dosing can be either overdosing or underdosing. So it's still the same effect. If you underdose, they develop resistance. If you overdose, they develop resistance. And resistance simply means when you use an antibiotic and it does not work the way it should work, or it does not give you the desired results, that is what resistance means in layman's terms. So resistance is simply you used an antibiotics either prescribed or maybe you inject subcutaneously, or you give in water, and after the required time, it does not give the desired results. That's when there's said to be a resistance to antibiotics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much. I was trying to cross-check something that you made mention about resistance. And one of the first points that actually popped up while I was doing that quick research was that, sorry, please, I hope somebody's mic is not on. Please, if your mic is on, please mute your mic. I want to believe that just our facilitator's mic, and then maybe me should be on. Thank you very much. So, all right. So, while Mr. Deke, can you just mute? I'm getting a feedback from your end. Because our network is very, very. Yes. Thank you very much. So, while you were making, that point, I was just trying to do a very, very quick research, and the first point that came out was that the overuse and also the misuse of antibiotic can lead to resistance, and incomplete and incorrect dosing, which was what you mentioned, can lead to antibiotic resistance, whereas the bacteria and the microorganism is withstanding the effect. And in layman term, withstand is just like maybe you are giving antibiotics to your poultry, and the bacteria is saying odeshi odeshi, so overuse of it, and not just overuse, the misuse of it and incorrect dosage can lead to antibiotic resistance. So please let us take note of what our facilitator have said, that very, very first point, that it's not just overuse, and the misuse of it, having the proper dosage can lead to resistance. Thank you very much, sir, for that point. So moving on to the next thing. Many farmers rely on antibiotics as a preventive measure. In your opinion, when is it appropriate to use antibiotics, and when should alternative methods be considered? I hope you got my question, sir. Or should I come again?
Yes, I did. I got your question perfectly.
Thank
Okay. Alternative methods. Well, let me just briefly break them down. Alternative methods could be, the known ones could be organic. Maybe you use natural herbs and all that. That's an alternative method. And there's what we call the use of probiotics. Probiotics too, they are drugs or compounds that are synthesized, maybe from some may be from organic compounds, and maybe some could be a mixture of organic and synthetic compounds. But the idea of probiotics is embedded in the name probiotics. They are supposed to work before, so they're supposed to prevent, not to treat. So those are the major alternative methods, using organic method of treatment, or organic method of checking diseases, and using of probiotics. But maybe enzymes also, there's what we call enzymes. They are also synthesized. It could be added to feeds and used as additives. All these are done to boost the immunity of birds and reduce or completely eliminate the use of antibiotics for treatment. However, organic producers are not supposed to withhold medical treatment from a sick animal in an effort to preserve its organic status. That's one fact we have to know. If you're using organic and your birds are coming down and it seems like it is not working, or you have used probiotics, or you are using things to prevent the breakdown of the immunity or to prevent bacterial invasion, and it's not working, the first and most important factor to consider is the state of health of your birds. So you can't stick to organic and say, because I'm using organic and it's not working, and it's evident that your birds are sick, you have to make sure that you attend to the birds firstly, whether it's organic or synthetic. When is it appropriate to use antibiotics prophylactically? I would say, from a practical point of view, that at most once in 4 to 8 weeks. And that this now depends on a lot of factors. At most once in 4 to 8 weeks. Now it depends on the kind of feed, because bacteria don't thrive where toxin levels are low. Most of the things that cause bacterial invasions are maybe high level of toxin in the feed, untreated water, very low level of biosecurity on the farm, such that intruders bring in all sorts of bacteria, external bacteria into the farm. So those are the factors that will determine if biosecurity on the farm is not okay, if the toxin level in the feed is high, if the toxin level in the water is high, it will definitely necessitate a much more frequent use of antibiotics. But from experience, it should be at most between 4 to 8 weeks, at intervals. And another rule of thumb is to start low and go slow. What I mean by that is you start with the lesser or the less strong antibiotics, and then with time you proceed. You don't just start with maybe very strong antibiotics because somebody recommended or somebody said. You have to check maybe if there are signs, there are symptoms, which we'll talk about later. Then you start with the lesser antibiotics, and then if the need arises, you may now proceed or progress in order to avoid resistance. It's like trying to using strong or very, very strong antibiotics for starters. Most times it could actually be likened to trying to kill a mosquito on a windscreen with a sledgehammer. It sounds very funny and awkward, but it could actually get the results, but the side effects could even be much more disastrous than what the antibiotic was intended to treat. So I think I've answered your question, like, if I'm correct.
Yes, thank you very, very much. A particular point caught me there where someone tried to kill a mosquito on a TV screen in comparison to using some level of antibiotics for starters. Please, I hope we are taking note of some very, very salient points that our facilitator is actually making here. You can these points are so vital that you can even jot them down, for those that are planning to go into poultry, for those that are there, for those that you've been looking at how to balance your use of antibiotics. Please take note of these points and make good use of them. So moving on to the next question. There is a growing push for antibiotic free poultry system. Like, you have some people pushing for antibiotic free poultry system. What are some practical steps farmers can take to reduce or eliminate their dependence on antibiotics without compromising the health of their poultry? So people are pushing for the fact that, okay, why don't we have a situation where we don't even depend on antibiotics at all? So what are some steps that farmer can take to ensure this, and then they don't want to compromise the health of their poultry? So it's like trying to find a balance between these two sides. Just, can you enlighten us on that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I've briefly mentioned some of them in an earlier question, second question. I said use of probiotics, use of enzymes, use of immune boosters, use of organic additives. Those are alternatives. So people that are pushing for antibiotic-free farming, antibiotic-free poultry, the practical steps they can take to reduce or eliminate dependence on antibiotics without compromising the health of the flock is to use probiotics, to engage in preventive activities in feeding, treatment of water. Make sure your water is treated, the source of your water is okay, and it should be clean, fresh water always. Make sure your feed is fresh. You get it from a reliable source, such that, and it's fresh, not stale feed, such that toxins would have built up in the feed. You get, you ensure you use immune boosters, use probiotics, and then importantly, there are some other key points, because all these only thrive when some other key points are observed, because they all work hand in hand. But these other points I want to mention now, they're like the foundation for successful batching, successful flock, successful stocking. The first one is to purchase your birds from reliable sources. The reason why I said that is this is like the most important. It's not really as if it's very, very more important, but it's like the most important, because no matter what, no matter how good the house is, it will not stand if the foundation is faulty. So if you get your birds from good and reliable sources, there will not be endemic cases. There will not be, there are some diseases, some antibacterial diseases that are actually passed down from parents to their offspring. But most people don't know this. So where you get your birds tells a lot on how much you succeed. So if you get your birds from a CRD prone source or a CRD prone farm, for example, and you then observe all these things, it may actually reduce the chances, but at a point in time, it will still manifest. So getting the birds from certified and good sources, they're very important. That's number one. Then secondly, purchase your feed from reliable sources. I've said that. Then thirdly, ensure that biosecurity on the farm is adhered to strictly. And biosecurity simply means biological security. That's where the words come from. Biosecurity. And it means shielding your birds from external factors, all kinds of external factors. People, rodents, birds, and all sorts. You should have a changing room on the farm. You should have foot dips on your farm. You should have visitors area. People should not be, strangers should not be allowed to come close to your loading area, close to your pen house area. You should even restrict the farm from visitors completely if possible. So because some people might have gone to other farms and then you visit your farm without knowing. So some people might not even have visited other farms, but the shoe that they are spotting from outside, and they will just come and then they will step on the farm, and then you take it to the pen and things start happening. So we have to be sure of where we purchase the birds, the feeds, and then we have to be sure of the biosecurity on the farm. Then have changing rooms, food dips, visitors areas. And lastly, on that question, I would advise farmers to have an in-depth knowledge of the behavior of birds. Birds cannot speak, they can only make sounds. Understanding their behavior, the kind of sounds they make, understanding their feeding pattern, understanding their physiological attributes. When you look at a bird, what do you see? When you look at the bird's comb, a bird's wattle, what do you see? When you look at the eyes, the sinuses, what do you see? When you look at the legs, what do you see? When you look at the feathers, is it ruffled? Is it clean? Is it, when you look at the litters, the color of the droppings, what do you see? So understand, having an in-depth knowledge of behavior of birds is a very good start also towards raising an antibiotic-free flock. Thank you.
All right, thank you very, very much for those facts and for those very, very important points. You know, even for the session we had last week, there was one point you mentioned that was also well stated in the previous session, and that is the fact that we should, try to restrict visitors from entry into our farm. Now, meaning that you should have measures, effective measures in place to accommodate visitors in your farm. So maybe, changing their shoes, if they need to wash their hands before they carry your beds, and a lot of, things that you should ensure you put in place so that people that are coming from outside or coming from another farm will not come to effect, or affect rather your beds. Thank you so much for those important points. So moving on to a very, very important question. What signs or symptoms should a farmer look for that indicate that an antibiotic might be necessary to treat their poultry? You've talked about the fact that farmers should understand their birds. Birds cannot talk, they can only make sounds. So, what are those signs? What are those symptoms? There could be a lot of them. And in fact, I believe there are a lot of them. But can you just tell us some of these signs that a farmer should look out for, that indicate that, oh, an antibiotic is now necessary to treat their poultry? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In summary, we have producing birds and maybe the growers or the starters, the non-producing birds. So I'll start with the non-producing birds, birds that you're maybe raising from day old till maybe they start laying, and those ones are not maybe fatteners, you are not producing them for meat. The first sign for non-producing birds is you need to understand their feeding pattern. There's a minimum amount of feed at each age, at a given age, that a bird is supposed to consume, whether from turkeys to layers to broilers to the heavy breeds and the likes. So when your birds feed per day and you monitor them and they are consuming the adequate amount of feed they're supposed to consume, you will know. And once you know that there is a drop in the consumption of feed, that is the first indication that something is about to happen. Once there is a drop in the quantity of feed, then you have to start investigating. It may be the onset of the incubation of something and you won't know. But once there's a drop in the feed, then you start investigations, then you can easily tell, you can narrow down, oh, is it the quality of the feed? Is it the weather? What is the percentage drop in the feeding of these birds? So that is the first thing to watch out for, the consumption of feed. If there is a drop in the consumption of feed, then it could be that an antibacterial disease is being incubated. Secondly, pay attention to their droppings, the litter. There's a regular color, so to speak, or maybe a standard color, a regular color. A healthy bird, the color of a healthy bird, the litter, the dropping is supposed to be something like maybe brownish, and it should be like brownish and thick, and it should be like not watery. It should be brownish, it should be thick. Then it could have maybe a slight dot of white. That is the normal droppings of the bird. Once you start observing any other color, it means something is about to happen. Once you start seeing watery white, once you start seeing golden brown, watery golden brown, once you start seeing deep green, once you start seeing light green, once you start seeing yellow droppings, once you start seeing black droppings, then it is always indicative of something. That means something is wrong with the guts. That means something is wrong with the gastrointestine of the birds. So every potential disease carries a warning, a significant warning, if you know how to pinpoint them and pay attention. So that is the second fact. Pay attention to their droppings. Now we'll go on to color of the bird's combs. A healthy bird that has developed combs, for example, whether it's producing or not, supposed to have a bright red comb. That's for birds. For turkeys too, pay attention to the snout, the head. Pay attention to, if, for example, growing turkeys, the head is supposed to have bright red dots. But if you discover that they are going pale, that means something is, the turkey may still be active, but it's only a matter of time before it comes down. So the color of the bird's combs, then the feathers. When you see that the feathers are not beautiful, they are not fine, they are ruffled. If a bird begins to have ruffled feathers and begins to become lethargic, listed, like the bird is just standing and you see the feathers all coming up and the bird is maybe closing the eyes and sleeping while others are jumping around, then something is about to happen. Then maybe check the eyes. There's what we call the sinuses, the ring around the eyes is supposed to be normal, like just a little white. And but if you are seeing maybe it's becoming red or it's becoming swollen, slightly swollen, then that means something is about to happen. Then let me give a particular example about chronic respiratory disease, CRD, which is very common. At the onset of CRD, there may not be any of these signs, no ruffled feathers, no change in color of droppings, nothing. But if you pay attention to birds at night, at the onset of CRD, when birds are sleeping, normal disease-free flock, there is absolutely no sound whatsoever. They are very quiet, like you don't hear their respiration, their breathing, you don't. They are very silent. But at the onset of CRD, if you go there at night when they are all settled, you'll be hearing scratching, croaking sounds like that of a frog, tiny frog, coming out from their throats. That means CRD is coming in. At the onset, it's easier to spot and treat. But when you don't know, at night is when it starts, when the temperature is a lot cooler. So it's like, I can liken CRD to the human catarrh. At night it becomes cold. If you have catarrh, it will disturb you at night. But during the day, when the sun is hot, it could actually break and give you some relief. That's exactly the same way. So at night, birds they make these funny noises from their throats. If you are not close to the birds at night at that point, you may not know. And maybe it has become very pronounced. That's when it starts during the day. You now start hearing all sorts of sounds coming out from their throats. That is not normal, not even them um, making sounds. They are just like croaking. So you know that. So the most important ones are the ones I've said, like keeping tabs with their feeding pattern, checking for the color of their droppings, the color of the combs, the feathers, the sinuses, the respiration. Now, for producing birds, plus all these signs, the first sign a producing bird will give to you, whether the bird is layers or turkeys, once they are producing eggs, the first sign that something is about to happen is a drop in the quantity of eggs produced. So once your eggs drop, like there's a dip, if you're maybe seeing like 15 crates and it drops to like 13 crates, once there's a considerable dip that cannot be accounted for, maybe it's not weather, it's not change in quality of feed, it's not any other thing. Once there's a drop in the production, then it is the first pointer that something is about to happen before maybe other signs will now follow. So those are the most important signs to look out for at the onset of diseases. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for those points. It was very very detailed, and I believe we all were able to pick something from that. Please, Mr. Kende, please can you help us close your video? Mr. Kende, please close your video. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are getting into a very important aspect now of this session. Please drop your questions in the chat box. If you have, for those that have questions, please drop it in the chat box, and we are going to pick it and attend to them. Please drop your questions in the chat box. So just click on the chat box and also drop your question. If you have questions, please drop it in the chat box. Some of the questions here, you've actually addressed them, while you were, stating other points. Okay, so talking about incorrect dosage, incorrect dosing of antibiotics. So, how can farmers ensure that they are using the correct amount of, antibiotics for their poultry? What are the ways they could ensure proper dosage? How can they ensure proper dosage? At least we know about, overuse, right? Okay, overuse. But how can they now ensure underuse? Something like improper, not giving enough as expected, incorrect dosing. So please, can you help us to shed light on that?
Okay. How can we check? Now, first thing I'll say is there are a few points, but let me just glance through them briefly. Number one, buy your drugs, your antibiotics from trusted and reliable sources. There are a lot of drugs out there, and there are lots of people that can recommend any kinds of drugs. And unfortunately, these days, these things are very expensive. An average antibiotic that works well and is effective, an average antibiotic costs from 6,000 naira upwards, depending on the recommended dose. So they are very expensive. And I don't know if farmers know that most of these antibiotics are actually packaged here in Nigeria. They are imported, they print the packages here so as to reduce cost. Then they are repackaged and sealed here. So a lot of brands, a lot of products are out there. Only go for trusted antibiotics from trusted sources. They may seem a little bit expensive on the high side, but it's better not to be penny wise, pound foolish. That's the first one. Second point is you use the antibiotics throughout the dosing period and for the number of days recommended, not intermittently. Some very funny opinion says that you can use antibiotics in the morning and in the afternoon stroke evening, you give them water. That is very wrong. It's like saying you can use your anti-malarial drug while you are sick. You're supposed to use it for 3 days at a stretch. And it's like saying you can use it in the morning and then leave it and then continue the following morning and then leave it again. It's the same effect. You have to use it throughout the period because there has to be continuity. And the average time it takes for an antibiotic to set in, whether preventively or curatively, is 3 days. So you won't see an antibiotic that is recommended that the number of days for use will be recommended below 3 days. There is none. The least number of days you need to use an antibiotic is 3 days, because it's at the third day that it should have been fully synthesized and it should have started doing the job it is meant to do. So use throughout the dosing period. If they say use for between 3 days and 5 days, seek opinion, seek expert opinion. If you need to use for 3 days and it's okay, fine. If you need to use for 5 days, there are some stubborn antibacterial diseases that you need to complete. There are even some that may require you using for 7 days. Depends on who's giving you your information and who you are consulting with. So but you have to complete it for the number of days recommended and use completely. It's only maybe vaccines and dewormers that are used intermittently. Vaccines are used for maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, you withdraw, and that's all. Dewormers, they may say use for 3 to 4 hours, depending on the type you get. It depends on what you know and who is mentoring you. Then another point is also includes it causes resistance. It can lead to organ failure for excessive dosing. It can lead to botulism for excessive dosing. It can lead to resistance for underdosing. Now, you need every farmer. I think every farmer needs to invest in getting measuring cans and micro scales. That's another very salient point. If you are told to dose them, I'm seeing a question. Someone is asking, what's the use of doxygen here? Let's take doxygen, the antibiotic doxygen, for example, contains two compounds, doxycycline and gentamicin. You're supposed to dose at 1 to 3. That's the dose. You need to understand what it means to dose at 1 to 3, number one. That means you are using 1 gram to 3 liters. So how do you know what is 1 gram? How do you know what is 3 liters? You need a scale, a micro scale, or a digital scale to measure 1 gram. And then you need a measuring can or a bucket or something that is graduated in liters to measure 3 liters. Okay, maybe you can know that roughly your white baby bell drinker is roughly 3 liters or so. Fine. But when you're doing much more water that is much more than that, how do you measure them? So accurate measuring starts with having accurate measurement devices, a digital scale, a micro digital scale, maybe it's graduated in intervals of 1 gram each, and it could measure up to 5 kg. And then you have your measuring can. So every farmer should invest in that. So that is like the fourth point. Then another point is understanding antibiotics deeply before engaging in combination of antibiotics. A lot of farmers are very, like I said, a lot of failures arise from improper information. This person said I should use this. This person said I should combine this. What do you know? Do you know whether you are combining 2 gram positive antibiotics? Or do you know whether you are combining 2 gram negative antibiotics? Or do you know if you are combining a fluoroquinolone and an aminoglycoside? Do you know the mode of action, the functions? You don't know. There's what we call contraindications and interaction in drugs. Some drugs interact. If you don't know and you combine 2 drugs, it could lead to organ failure for some of the birds. Maybe the ones that are strong enough can survive it. So you need to have a deep understanding of antibiotics and how they work before even trying to maybe use them or then combine. Then lastly, another point is, but this is maybe for advanced levels, if you're using antibiotics, it's always advisable to use untreated water for the period where you are using the antibiotics. Because some, I won't be able to mention them here, some antibiotics actually react with chlorine, for example. And chlorine is like the culprit that is used widely for water treatment. Some antibiotics react with chlorine in water. So when you're using antibiotics, use untreated. It doesn't mean the water should not be clean. Untreated does not imply unclean or unfresh. It has to be clean and fresh. But treated means you have not added a chemical compound to kill the bacteria in it. So you use untreated water, clean and fresh. But maybe where you don't have access to untreated water, maybe you are treating centrally. Then for those kind of antibiotics, maybe there are ways we neutralize the effect of the reaction. Maybe most times we add a certain amount of ascorbic acid in the water just to neutralize the effect of the chain reaction the antibiotic can have with the chlorine. So I think those are the points that are very, very important. So let me stop here so we can go to the next question.
All right. Thank you so much for those wonderful points. Please, if you have questions, kindly drop them in the chat box. Kindly drop them in the chat box. Kindly drop them in the chat box. Thank you very, very much. Kindly drop them in the chat box. Okay, so thank you very, very much. Let us just take one, and thank you for addressing, one of those questions while you were talking about this aspect. So let's just take one question from our audience. So this person is asking that they are usually like there's a confusion with both yellow, brown, and black poop. Please kindly help us make, like expatiate on what each of these poop represent. Like if you see a yellow poop, what does it mean? If you see a brown foaming poop, what does it mean? Now he is saying that yellow and brown foaming poop is confused to be like, some people state it as being the early stages of coccidiosis. So can you just tell us specifically, if you see a brown poop, what does it mean? If you see a black poop, what does it mean? If you see a yellow poop, what does it mean? And some other ones that you stated there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yellow, brown, black poop, golden, brown foamy poop. Number one, it depends on the age of the birds. For early birds, maybe first week, second week, third week, up till maybe like the 8th week. Yes, you can say brown foamy poop is the early stage of coccidiosis. That is very correct. But I can also confidently and practically tell you that, for example, using turkeys as a practical example, I can confidently tell you that turkeys may be incubating what we call early stage coccidiosis. I'm saying this from experience, because most people will say, turkeys don't have coccidiosis. There's what we call early stage coccidiosis in turkeys. I don't know what causes it, but this is something that is very, very practical. And you will not see any change in any color of poop. You see normal poop. All you just see is that they are huddling together. If you are observing all the temperature and ventilation procedures, like everything is on point, the place is well ventilated, the place is well heated, you still see the turkeys like Miss Khadija, please, can you mute your mic? Thank you. So you still see the turkeys that they will keep huddling together, like they will just be clustering, and you see that when you get into the brooder house yourself, you'll be sweating and you're like, what's wrong? It's just, funny thing is, it can set in on the second day, day 2 of the arrival of the birds. But it's like I said, these things are nothing beats experience, knowing what to do. So at the early stage, to address your question, at the early stage, brown poop could say it's early stage of coccidiosis, fine. But what if they are laying birds? Laying birds don't have coccidiosis. Coccidiosis is only particular to birds at a young age, 8 weeks and less. Afterwards, coccidiosis is not an issue. So what if it's laying birds, for example? Now, I can say from experience too that brown foamy poop could actually, or brown golden poop, if it's much there, could actually be the onset of Escherichia coli, E. coli. You get, so it could mean a lot of things. So for young birds, maybe if you have now treated for coccidiosis and then you still see that it's still there, maybe golden, brown, and it's watery, you could know that, oh, maybe they are incubating Escherichia coli. Then you go ahead to address that. So yellow, it could indicate a lot of things, but yellow is one of the most dangerous colors of poop you can see. And I mean bright yellow. It's one of the most dangerous. It could indicate staphylococcus, it could indicate Clostridium. It depends. But whatever these things would indicate, knowing what the color says, it should be based on experience and based on the endemic nature of the disease on the farm. If on the farm E. coli is endemic, you know that E. coli it disturbs you and you have not vaccinated, you should know when this thing starts. If CRD, you should know. If it is Newcastle disease, you should know that once you start seeing light green poop all over, and you know that you have issues with Newcastle, you should know that it is time to vaccinate. The same thing with brown poop inside whitish diarrhea. Whitish diarrhea, it could actually mean fowl typhoid. Deep green watery diarrhea could actually mean fowl cholera. You get a lot of things. Then what is doxygen used for? It's a broad spectrum antibiotic. I can't really answer that question because it depends on what you are looking to treat. Depends on Then let me briefly mention, but I'll still mention it later. There's what we call sensitivity charts. There's what we call um, these tests. If you have an issue, but most farmers think it is very cost intensive. No, it is not, depending on your location. If you have issues on the farm, if it's becoming an outbreak, it's always advised that you take samples to the lab, maybe carcasses, fresh carcasses. They'll ask you to bring 2 or 3, and they run tests, and they'll tell you, they'll say this is what was found. They will draw a sensitivity chart of antibiotics that you can use. So you can now use the chart to read and say, oh, this is what these birds are incubating. This is what can work. And this is what they are resistant to. That table will show you everything. So you see the ones that they are resistant to, you know that you cannot use that one. So if you don't know, and for example, you are incubating something that an antibacterial disease that is resistant to gentamicin, for example, and you are using doxygen. Doxygen is a combination of doxycycline and gentamicin. They will be resistant to gentamicin. Your only saving grace may be that they may not be resistant to the combination of both. So if you use maybe streptomycin for a disease that they are streptomycin resistant, it means you are simply adding fuel to the fire that is burning on the farm. So I think I've been able to address 3 questions at a go.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much, sir. All right, so okay, before we move on to the next question, let me just ask just what will probably be the last question from my end before we now fully focus on questions from our audience. Okay, so I'm talking about withdrawal period. So withdrawal periods are crucial when it comes to selling poultry products for human consumption. And based on my understanding of withdrawal period, is the time between the last administration of a veterinary drug, it could be antibiotics, to poultry, and the time when that poultry products are safe for human consumption. So that's just my own idea of withdrawal period. So now looking at this withdrawal period, can you explain why it is essential? Just give us an overview of withdrawal period in detail. Me, I've just given like a summarized version of what it may be, but can you go into detail of what this withdrawal period is about and why it is essential for farmers to follow these guidelines and how can they do it effectively?
Okay, thank you. You've basically defined withdrawal period in a layman's terms. In layman's terms, rather. Withdrawal period is simply the period from the last day of the antibiotic use to when it is safe for human consumption. Is as simple as that. So the first thing we have to establish is that each antibiotics, each drugs, like human drugs, each drugs come with withdrawal period. The reason they come with them withdrawal period is because these birds are eventually used for consumption, either through the eggs or through the carcass. So it is when they're on antibiotics and for a given number of days after, depending on the drug, it is also always said that they are not safe for consumption, whether the eggs or the carcass. So you've simply defined withdrawal periods. Now, the importance of withdrawal periods is, I think, is pretty simple. If not for the economic conditions, the unfavorable policies, most farmers are just doing life on their own. No intervention from the government or any intervention whatsoever. So if you're asking a farmer to observe withdrawal period and there is no form of backup or compensation or something, it's going to be difficult. That's why in this part of the world, in this climate, it is not really observed. But the major reason, they are for health reasons, medical reasons, because it has been established. Research has shown that antibiotic abuse in birds has been directly found to be responsible for antibiotic resistance in humans. And it is as simple as that. You can go and do the research and see what I'm talking about. So if you have been abusing antibiotics in your birds, for example, or you don't adhere to withdrawal periods before consumption, especially of the carcass, it could always lead to antibiotic resistance in humans. Some say that there are some researches that now prove that it could cause cancer and all that. I don't know. I haven't delved into that aspect of the research, but I am sure of the ones that prove that resistance in humans, antibiotic resistance in humans can be directly linked to birds. So, for example, if you consume birds that the withdrawal period for they use, maybe for example, let me use a strong antibiotic, let me say streptomycin. They were injected, and the withdrawal period for streptomycin, let's assume, is 15 days. And within 5 days, the bird dies or wants to die, and you say, oh, you want to save cost, and you kill the bird and you eat, depending on the dosage you get. And maybe the streptomycin has been fully absorbed. At the end of the day, if a human is sick and there's streptomycin is one of the antibiotics supposed to treat that ailment, and they give the person and it doesn't work, there's a resistance, then it can be directly linked to consumption of the streptomycin resistant variety in the carcass of the bird. So that is the most important effect of withdrawal period that I can say. Then that's majorly the most important effects. Then I will also mention that, let me not say the best antibiotics, because everything is subjective. There are some that work for different diseases, but generally the best antibiotics, they have the least absorption period and they have the least absorption period and the least withdrawal period. There is a particular fourth generation pure drug that is used to treat CRD that has an absorption period of 3 hours. As in, once you introduce the antibiotic in water to your beds, it is fully absorbed in 3 hours. Absorption period simply means the time it is fully absorbed from when you introduce it to them. And the withdrawal period is no more than 5 days. Those are like the best class of antibiotics. And it also depends on, like I said, knowledge. We have first generation, second generation, third generation, up to fifth generation antibiotics. Knowing what you want to use, what you want to achieve at each point matters. So if you know that you have to really face, maybe there's a very virulent, stubborn strain of antibacterial disease, you may need to use them and observe the withdrawal period, please go ahead. But if you know that, oh, you have access to maybe third generation drugs that you can use that have maybe minimum withdrawal period and they work effectively, fine, so be it. So that is the essence of withdrawal period, basically, as it is. I hope I've addressed your question.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. There are still some questions, but we can't take them because of our time. So quickly, let us move into the question that have been asked by our audience. Please, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat box. Please kindly drop your questions in the chat box. Drop your questions in the chat box while we address these ones. Thank you very much. Okay, so somebody asked saying that sorry, please. All right. All right. The person asked, said, I was told that you use that. Okay, he was told that you should use antibiotics every 4 weeks, Lasota 4 weeks, and multivitamin too every 4 weeks. Can we use antibiotics for 5 days, followed by Lasota, and then multivitamin for the next 5 days? So that's the question that the person is asking. I hope you got the question, sir.
Yes, I did. I got your question. So it's correct. It's correct. You were told to use antibiotics every 4 weeks. You were told to use antibiotics every 4 weeks, Lasota 4 weeks, multivitamin 2 every 4 weeks. Well, like I said, depends on the level of biosecurity, your water treatment principles, the level of toxin in your feed, and all that. That's what largely determines the frequency of use. You cannot use antibiotics every 4 weeks if you don't have need for it. You can use it once in 8 weeks. You can use it once in 6 weeks. But when you really have issues on the farm, maybe there's endemic this and that, you may have to use every 4 weeks, fine. But like I said, the rule of thumb is between 4 to 8 weeks. Can use multivitamin every 4 weeks, fine. Can use it every 2 weeks. Depends on the state of health of the birds. If they are producing, if they are not producing well, if there's heat stress, for example, during maybe February to March to April, we encourage the frequent use of multivitamins, maybe every 2 weeks, because heat is always a very, very detrimental factor. So can you use antibiotics for 5 days, followed by Lasuta and then multivitamin? Well, depends on the kind of antibiotics you're using. You can use for 3 days, you can use for 4, you can use for 5 days. Fine. You give fresh water for another 2 or 3 days before you vaccinate. Then when you vaccinate, you still allow a lapse, give fresh water for another 2 or 3 days before using multivitamin. Multivitamins may be for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, depending on a lot of factors, like I said, weather, the state of the birds, production, and all that. So I think I've answered that question.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I believe the person that asked the question, you've been able to get clarity to your answer. So moving on, because of our time, this is the last question we are taking for today. The person is asking, he said, what can we use to treat water for our poultry? What can we use to treat water for our poultry? And is treated water for poultry drinkable? So that's the question this person is asking.
Okay, thank you. Water treatments could be localized, general. Maybe you treat in small drums or you treat in your water tanks and all that. It depends. I always say this, the first rule of whatever you do is availability. We have, there's what we call isoclor, it's like a tablet. There's a dosage. Maybe you dip one tablet in your drum or in your tank or put several tablets. There's always a dosage. There's isoclor, there is pure chlorine. There's some other water treatment methods too. So depending on what you have in your area, what is closest to you, what is accessible, and depending on the knowledge you have. If you are using chlorine, for example, and you know you have access to pure chlorine, because there is pure chlorine and there is counterfeited chlorine. So if you are using pure chlorine, for example, you have to pay attention to the dosing in what we call parts per million. Chlorine, you shouldn't dose more than 25 to 30 ppm parts per million for pure chlorine. That I can't go into details about what parts per million means here, but it simply means, for example, if I want to dose at 20 parts per million for a 5,000-liter tank, I will put 25 grams of chlorine. 25 grams I'm talking of is really very small. It may not be more than a teaspoon, not even up to a tablespoonful in 5,000 liters tank. That tells you how potent and powerful it is. Now, can treated water for poultry be drinkable? It depends. Chlorinated water, it is not advisable for humans to consume chlorinated water. That is my answer to that question. But where you have, maybe you have, what do they call it? You have issues or you have restrictions such that you have no choice. Well, if it is still in safe dosages, then it can be consumed by humans. But chlorinated water, it is really not very advisable, because I think studies have shown that it has been linked to some cancers of some kind too. That's in humans, not in birds. Because what it does in birds is different from what it does in humans. So I think I've answered that question.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. All right, so we're just going to give a very small window. Biodun Alalade, I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Please kindly ask your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. The name is Biono Alalade, so you try.
All right. Yes.
I want to thank our facilitator for the way he dispensed the knowledge that he had gathered over time, and the way he has shared with us the experiences. Two things I want to call attention to, or rather just keep in with the issue of withdrawal time. Most of the drugs that we use in this country are um, basically imported. The ones that are reliable and dependable, they are basically imported. And those ones that are not imported are manufactured in the same standard. And I understand that the way and manner in which, um, let me call them Europeans, Americans, eat their own meals and cook them makes it important for this withdrawal time to be kept. But us in here, we we will we will boil our chicken so well that after we have boiled, we will still fry before we cook. The same thing with eggs. Here, you don't see much of omelette and that kind of style with which the Oyinbos eat their eggs and whatever. Here we will fry. If you are not frying, you will boil at a very high temperature. The thing becomes hard before you eat it. So I think that there will be a little leeway for us here, particularly in Africa, concerning this withdrawal time. Maybe that's the reason why it doesn't really affect us if we don't keep it strictly in this side of the country. The second that I want to ask, or rather that I want to chip in about, is the issue of he mentioned that there is a particular antibiotic that it has a fast absorption time and fast withdrawal time. He didn't really particularly mention the name of that antibiotic and what it is being used. Okay, he said it's being used for CRD, but he didn't mention the particular name of that antibiotic so that we can benefit and probably try it on our farms and see whether it will work for us too. And lastly, um, the okay, I think I should just put pay to it on that level. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much, sir. So, our facilitator, please, do you have a contribution to what Mr. Biodo have said?
Well, thank you, Mr. Lalade. It's what you said holds true, but like I said, it's always, like I always say, it's always better to err on the side of caution. As per the withdrawal period, that's what I'm addressing now. What obtains in saner climes in advanced countries may not obtain here, fine. But as much as it allows, as much as the economic conditions and the farm principles allow, I'll still encourage farmers to try and stick to withdrawal periods as much as they can. Then secondly, on the antibiotic that you said I did not mention, I did not mention the name deliberately because a lot of people will process information differently. So I may mention the name now and someone will start looking for it all around. And these antibiotics, they are third generation, they are so powerful that I don't know. They are good, but they are very bad as well if they are misused. So it's maybe if we chat privately, I may give you details if you need it. And then like I always have this other advanced masterclass training every month for a token. I give all the details from experience that anybody that needs to know knows. From plugs to uses to everything. So that's why I did not mention it in this forum. I hope you understand me, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
So for I told those that have questions should drop their questions in the chat box. But for the sake of these people that have been raising up your hand, these are the last two people we are giving an opportunity. And we're giving you people an opportunity to ask just one question. If you ask more than one question, it's only one you will receive answer to. So Pen Paul, please ask your question. Just a question. Just a question. And also, please ask your question. And also, Semedion Mufat, you will also ask just one question. And our facilitator will answer those questions in just one minute. So please ask your question, Pen Paul. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm so grateful for the opportunity you've given me. Please, I just want to ask question about both the synthetic and the organic way of treating E. coli effectively. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Our facilitator, please just hold on. You are going to respond to him. So I want to just answer both of them together. So he asked that he asked about organic and synthetic medication for E. coli. So please just note that. Semedion Mufat, please can you ask your question also? Pempo, you want to say
Okay.
something?
All right. My question is, where I am, I don't have any veterinary lab. Can conventional medical lab carry out tests for poultry or animal diseases?
All right. Thank you very much. Our facilitator, I believe you got both questions that was asked.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I got them. I'll start with the last person that asked if conventional labs can detect or can analyze poultry diseases. That is not possible. I have not seen one. I have not seen one. So there are labs meant for, giving an example, in the city of Ibadan, I know of CHI lab in Oluyole. I think I know of one other one again. There are like two labs within Oluyole that take carcasses and then they dissect it and give you details. Then you could also, if you have a competent virologist or a competent veterinarian, they may not necessarily take it to the lab, but they know what to look out for. So they may actually give you accurate prescriptions, accurate conclusions. They may even not take to lab, may just come to the farm, observe the droppings, get a carcass, dissect it, and then they will tell you immediately that this is what is happening, and they will recommend drugs to use. So there are no labs that attend to humans that can attend, that I know of. I didn't think I've seen anyone. So then going to Paul that asked what's the organic and synthetic medication for E. coli. I can only tell you the synthetic version. And like I said, I don't like mentioning names on the forum because anybody could pick and then process the information wrongly. So if you private chat, I could give you some things. But talking about organic, I'm always not necessarily, because of dosing issues and these things, the research levels on these organic treatment levels, it's not really widely accepted. So unless I begin to see research papers and I begin to see maybe companies producing strictly organic with proper scientific background and research and results, then maybe I can now start recommending. But if you're speaking of synthetic medication, then I can suggest one or two, because E. coli is really, it's like a primary bacterial infection which attracts other secondary bacteria. E. coli could actually bring in CRD, could bring in salmonella and all that. So is E. coli, has it brought in some other secondary opportunistic bacterial infections? So those are the things you consider. You know that you're not treating E. coli alone. So you have to consider that you're treating E. coli and maybe fowl typhoid, E. coli and maybe salmonella, E. coli and some other things. That's what we dictate the best course of action. So I hope I've answered both questions.
All right. Thank you so much, our facilitator, for your time. Thank you very much for the session we've had with you. We really appreciate you. Okay, so we just need something from you people, everyone here. Please kindly go to the community page and drop your review about this session and also other session. Basically, Livestock Hour. Go to the community page and drop your reviews there. What have you learned? How has it been for you? Also, we're also going to, drop a reminder on the community page also so that you can do that. But I just tell you ahead of time that you should drop your reviews on the community page about Livestock Hour. So we want to appreciate every one of you that made it down here for this session. Also, the recording will be sent to the group, as soon as possible. Immediately we do some, filtering and some editing and all that. We'll drop it on the community page for everyone to still go through it and also relearn whatever it is that you've forgotten. Thank you so much for coming. The meeting has ended. See you next week, Friday. Thank you. So we can exit the call. The meeting has ended. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. The meeting has ended. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. You can exit the meeting. Thank you. Thank you. You can exit the meeting. Thank you so much. The meeting has ended. You can exit the meeting now. For those of us that are still on, you can exit the meeting. You can exit the meeting. The meeting has ended. You can exit the meeting. The meeting has ended. Why are people still joining? We've ended the meeting. Please kindly leave. We've ended the meeting. We've ended the meeting. Please, you can all leave now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Guide, MP3 review, Bluetooth MP3, Android charger, iPhone
Good evening, everyone. Who is that? Ìròyìn ṣó dẹ̀ dà báyìí, ṣé wàá lè drop fún ni? Ẹ́